friends, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while since I made a video. I don't think I've made a video on here since the first couple of days in March where I did my February recap. So I guess I'll catch you up on what I've been reading recently. I can't talk about all the books that I've been reading in March because I've been reading to judge the BookTube prize. I am reading for the fiction round, octafinals, fiction category octafinals round. And so 3 of the books that I have read so far this month have been for the BookTube prize. So can't talk about those. I will tell you the titles because why not? So far I've read The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. I've read Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen. And I've read The Final Revival of Opal and Nev by Dawnie, Walton. So I've read 3 and I have 3 to go. So at the end of this month, I will be sharing my thoughts. I've been making a vlog style video where I chat a little bit about each book when I've finished reading it so that I kind of keep my thoughts coherent. And so I'll share that with you when the round is over at the end of the month. The ballots are due on March 30th and I still have 3 books to read. So that's what I'll be doing this weekend and the next few days. So those are 3 books that I have been reading so far this month and can't talk about them yet. But other than that, I've still been having a fantastic reading month. I have read a few other books that I can tell you about. The first thing I finished in March that wasn't a book that I was carrying over from February because I did do that. I had a couple of books that I was reading in February and didn't finish them, and so I finished those in the first couple of days in March, and I talked about that in the previous video. So the first book that I read in March, and just March, was King Lear, Shakespeare's King Lear, which this was my first time reading this, and I absolutely enjoyed it. It is a tragedy, but it's also a little bit of a comedy because we're reading about a man who does something really stupid. He does, I guess, and it seems he does it unprompted. So you know that story in the Bible about the prodigal son where one of the sons says to the father, you know, I want to take my inheritance and go off and live my life. And the father does give one of his sons some of, well, what is due him. And then the other son stays at home. Well, in King Lear decides to split up his kingdom between his 3 daughters. And he... I guess wisdom tells him that he should ask for some kind of a commitment from these girls before he does that. So he asks them how much they love him, and based on their response, that's how much money or how much power he gives them. And so he has 3 daughters, and he actually ends up sharing his fortune between 2 of the daughters and disinherits another because her answer doesn't satisfy him. But as we see, folly no matter how it's done, and so things don't go well for King Lear. The relationship between him and the 2 daughters who pledged their undying love for him, that doesn't go very well. And then even the daughter who he disinherits, when she tries to help him, that doesn't go well either. So this is a tragedy because almost all the characters have some, like, I don't want to spoil this story that's 500 years old. I want you to read it. But yeah, there's some really tragic circumstances that happen in this book. People who are, I guess they reap the consequences of foolish actions. And it's hard to see sometimes where people try to help other people who are a little bit down on their luck, or people who are reaping those harsh consequences. When you try to help someone, it still doesn't work out for them or for you, that kind of thing. And so I really enjoyed, the thing that I most enjoyed about this book was that there is a fool. He's called a fool. It's like a court jester. And he's the person who King Lear speaks to. And so he is able to say some really profound things, but the other people don't really value him and don't value his thoughts as much, because if they listen to him, they'd probably do better. But this fool is given wisdom. His words, his lines are counsel if they were only heeded. And so there's a lot of really quotable passages in this book. I feel like I want to reread this and maybe memorize some things, because I don't have a Shakespeare play, or I don't have Shakespeare lines memorized. That's something that people used to be able to do, and it was one of the things that you could talk about as bragworthy if you could recite lines from plays like this. So I don't know, calling myself a thespian wannabe. So maybe this is one of the plays that I will reread at some point and try to memorize. But for now, read it, really enjoyed it. I read this one because of a challenge. I wanted to choose a book that had king in the title. That was my choice, and I read it and I loved it. The next thing that I read that I really, really enjoyed, I read My Antonia by Willa, Cather, and I buddy read that with a lady named Jen, who I've met on Instagram. I showed you her bookshelf when we did the bookshelf tours in December. And Jen and I read My Antonia by Willa, Cather, which we both enjoyed for, I guess, slightly different reasons. And it's interesting because this is the third book in a trilogy. This was the first that we had read from her. And we liked it enough that we want to now read the two books that came before this trilogy. But I guess the books are all standalones. And this one was fascinating because of some of the choices that the author makes. So this book was published in the 1920s, set in Nebraska. And we're reading about pioneers, people who have come from other parts of the country, or people who've come from other countries, other places in Europe specifically, and what the society is like as people view people who have other origins, how they treat them, and what they expect from them, and also what their lives are like based on maybe some of that origin story. They follow different paths. And so one of the focal points of this book is the paths that are available to women in this time, in the 1920s, and a little later, because we're reading about some of the women. We meet them as girls, and then we see how they get married and what their lives are like when they become adults. So the title character, Antonia, we're reading this story about her being reported by a boy, and so we have a boy's perspective, but the story is really about these women. His grandmother, his neighbor, Antonia, and she is Bohemian, meaning that her family is from I guess back then it was the Czech Republic, or now it's the Czech Republic. It was Czechoslovakia. I don't know. Her family is Czech, and so they are called Bohemians, and there are other Europeans from Norway and I think Russian, and it's a frightfully atmospheric story. And I say frightfully because we see how the environment, the physical and the social environment, weigh on the characters. Physical environment more so because we see like seasonal affective disorder at work, and how people react to their physical circumstances, and it is harsh, it is brutal. But I love this story. I thought it was just so well written in terms of the atmosphere, really centered, really, really bright, vivid atmosphere. But I still wonder about the decision to tell the story through a boy's perspective when the focus is just obviously on women by a woman author. So I don't know. I'm going to delve a little deeper into that trilogy at some point, and I'll report back. So yeah. Loved that story, loved that book. And then the last book that I guess I'll chat a little bit about here is Zero Fail by Carol Leonnig. And I have the book right here, but it is without the dust jacket. So Zero Fail, Carol Leonnig. My dust jacket is upstairs in my bedroom. My daughter is in there taking a nap. So no, we are not going to wake her up. So yeah. Zero Fail is about the rise and fall of the Secret Service. It explores how the Secret Service in the United States government, how it became necessary, why it was necessary to start having protection for the president, and it really started with the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. And so this journalist delves a little bit into the history of the Secret Service, some of their mistakes, some of their missteps, some of the lack of support that they experienced, and how, even though sometimes people were trying to advocate for more support for this protection team, that it was usually reactive. So if something bad happened, then they'd throw money at a problem, they'd throw bodies at a problem. So after the assassination of after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, that's really how the Secret Service started. And after presidential candidates like McKinley was a president. After McKinley was killed, and after presidential candidates like Wallace were killed, and after President Kennedy was killed, that's usually when there would be improvements to the system of the Secret Service, a little bit of exploration of lessons learned, and throwing some money at a problem, even though, the Secret Service administration had been asking for increase in resources prior to these incidents. One of the things that we do, tragedy happens, and so we over-respond, we overreact, and we try to give them everything that they said they wanted, even though we probably don't really address the problem. So this book was really an expose into the Secret Service, composed from interviews with, I guess, hundreds of agents over the years. People working at different times in different positions came forward and spoke to this journalist and her team, I guess, and talked a little bit about what their experience was like as part of the Secret Service, what it's like to guard the president, to guard the family of the president or the other diplomats who receive Secret Service protection. I learned some things. I learned quite a lot from reading this book, not just about the administration of the Secret Service, because I didn't really know that they did other things, that they were the team tasked with working counterfeit. Like, I didn't know that. I thought all Secret Service did was, walk around with earphones and flank the president. No, they do other things. I learned that presidential candidates can get Secret Service protection from very early. And through this book, we learned about how early President Obama started getting Secret Service protection. And he started receiving protection even before he got the Democratic nomination, because it was such a high profile candidacy, and also one that was rife with threats from just like every side. He talked about how many threats were put on his life. They said he'd get about 30 credible threats per day. So, I learned some things like that, but I also learned some good things and some terrible things about, Secret Service agents and the culture in the Secret Service, as well as things about the president, because this author goes into, some of the things that the Secret Service agents have reported, whether it's things that they saw themselves or just things that happened that they knew about, like, the infidelity that happened with certain presidents and so on. I don't want to get into that. Read the book. I received a complimentary copy of this book from the publishers. Penguin Random House sent it to me last year, and I'd wanted to read it before, but it's a big book. It's almost 500 pages, and so I put it down, and I finally picked it up this month because I buddy read it with my ladies, Heidi and Doris and Patrice, and man, those ladies are excellent to read books like this with, because we had conversations about the book, but also what we were learning and how it relates to other things that we talk about, and it was just fantastic. So yeah, that was the highlight of the last couple of weeks. I was a little bit behind in the buddy read because there's almost all these other things always happening, and so I was a little bit behind on the conversations, but we got to a point where I couldn't sleep. This book, like I said, starts with Abraham Lincoln's presidency, and it goes all the way to the Trump years. And in the last chapter or two, the last chapter or two focuses on the Trump presidency. And I was up reading and I was about to fall asleep, but I was like, I can't fall asleep with Trump in the White House. So I don't know. I don't know how to go to sleep at that point, but I did. I fell asleep. I fell asleep with Trump on the watch. It's funny though. This book was really great. It talked a lot about, the mission, which is to protect the leaders of this country and protect diplomats from other countries when they're visiting. And the zero fail mission is to make sure that they don't lose anyone. And it talked a lot about the threat, how difficult that has been at certain points. What are some of the failures that have occurred without actually failing the mission? So, it talked about some of the people who have made threats against the president's life, people who tried to infiltrate the security system around the White House, people who actually succeeded in getting close to the president, whoever the president was at different points. And, there's a lot that I learned, and I just really appreciated that book, really enjoyed reading it, but even more so, loved the discussion with Doris and Patrice and Heidi. So those are the books that I have finished recently. I have started reading a few other things. I started reading a couple of middle grade books, started reading Little House on the Prairie, and had to put it aside because the storyline was just so similar to my Antonia, Willa, Cather. Started reading a couple of other things. But those are the books that I'm focusing on. And for the next few days, I'm going to be finishing up my BookTube prize reading. So not much other fun stuff that I can read right now. So we will check in at the end of the month. I'll tell you what else I have read that is... I'll tell you what else I have read that I can tell you about. At the end of the month, you'll hear about everything, because at the end of the month, I'll tell you about the BookTube prize books as well. So that's what's been going on here. Would love to chat with you in the comments. I've missed chatting with you guys. So let me know what you've been reading, what you've been loving, what's going on in your bookish life, or, if you want to talk about life otherwise. Highlights, share them with me. Let's chat in the comments. And until we come back for another video, happy reading. Bye.